Chapter 36. Jason.
Jason had ridden the wind many times. Being the wind was not the same. He felt out of control, his thoughts scattered, no boundaries between his body and the rest of the world. He wondered if this is how monsters felt when they were defeated, bursting into dust, helpless and formless. Jason could sense Nico's presence nearby. The west wind carried them into the sky above Split. Together they raced over the hills, past Roman aqueducts, highways, and vineyards. As they approached the mountains, Jason saw the ruins of a Roman town spread out in the valley below. Crumbling walls, square foundations, and cracked roads, all overgrown with grass, so it looked like a giant mossy game board. Pavonia set them down in the middle of the ruins, next to a broken column the size of a redwood. Jason's body reformed. For a moment it felt even worse than being in the wind, like he'd suddenly been wrapped in a lead overcoat. "Yes, mortal bodies are terribly bulky," Pavonia said, as if reading his thoughts. The wind god settled on a nearby wall with his basket of fruit, and spread his russet wings in the sun. "Honestly, I don't know how you stand it day in and day out." Jason scanned their surroundings. The town must have been huge once. He could make out the shells of temples and bathhouses, a half-buried amphitheater, and empty pedestals that must have once held statues. Rows of columns marched off to nowhere. The old city walls wove in and out of the hillside like stone thread through a green cloth. Some areas looked like they'd been excavated, but most of the city just seemed abandoned, as if it had been left to the elements for the last 2,000 years. "Welcome to Salona," Pavonia said. "Capital of Dalmatia, birthplace of Diocletian. But before that, long before that, it was the home of Cupid." The name echoed, as if voices were whispering it through the ruins. Something about this place seemed even creepier than the basement at Split. Jason had never thought much about Cupid. He'd certainly never thought of Cupid as scary. Even for Roman demigods, the name conjured up an image of a silly winged baby with a toy bow and arrow, flying around in his diapers on Valentine's Day. "Oh, he's not like that," Pavonia said. Jason flinched. "You can read my mind?" "I don't need to." Pavonius tossed his bronze hoop in the air. "Everyone has the wrong impression of Cupid until they meet him." Nico braced himself against a column, his legs trembling visibly. "Hey, man!" Jason stepped towards him, but Nico waved him off. At Nico's feet the grass turned brown and wilted. The dead patch spread outward, as if poison were seeping from the soles of his shoes. "Ah," Favonius nodded sympathetically. "I don't blame you for being nervous, Nico D'Angelo. Do you know how I ended up serving Cupid?" "I don't serve anyone," Nico muttered. "Especially not Cupid." Favonius continued as if he hadn't heard. "I fell in love with a mortal named Hacanthius. He was quite extraordinary." "He?" Jason's brain was still fuzzy from his wind trip, so it took him a second to process that. Yes, Jason Grace," Favonius arched an eyebrow. "I fell in love with a dude. Does that shock you?" Honestly, Jason wasn't sure. He tried not to think about the details of godly love lines, no matter who they fell in love with. After all, his dad Jupiter wasn't exactly a model of good behavior. Compared to some of the other Olympian love scandals he'd heard about, the West Wind falling in love with a mortal guy didn't seem very shocking. "I guess not. So, Cupid struck you with his arrow, and you fell in love?" Pavonia snorted. "They make it sound so simple. Alas, love is never simple. You see, the god Apollo also liked Hacanthius. He claimed they were just friends. I don't know. But one day I came across them together playing a game of quoits." There was that weird word again. "Quoits?" "A game with those hoops," Nico explained, though his voice was brittle. "Like horseshoes." "Sort of," Pavonia said. "At any rate, I was jealous. Instead of confronting them and finding out the truth, I shifted the wind and sent a heavy metal ring right at Hacanthius' head. Well," the wind god sighed, "as Hacanthius died, Apollo turned him into a flower, the Hacanthius. I'm sure Apollo would have taken horrible vengeance on me, but Cupid offered me his protection. I'd done a terrible thing, but I'd been driven mad by love, so he spared me, on the condition that I work for him, forever." Cupid. The name echoed through the ruins again.